The Velari had watched Earth for 3 years. They floated in the darkness. Beyond the moon, their ships hidden from human eyes, and they studied. They watched the news broadcasts. They listened to the radio signals. They observed the satellites and the space stations and the little robots humans sent to Mars. High Commander Zethal sat in his chair aboard the flagship and read the final report. His species had conquered 17-star system. They had crushed civilizations that built cities in the clouds and empires that spanned entire planets. Earth, he believed, would be the easiest conquest yet. The humans were divided. They fought wars against each other over invisible lines drawn on maps. They argued about politics and religion and things that seemed meaningless to the Velari. Their weapons were primitive. They used chemical explosions to push metal through the air. They had no shields, no energy weapons, no ships that could travel faster than light. They are children, Zethal said to his advisors. They have not even left their own system. This conquest will take 3 days. Perhaps less, his advisors agreed. Math was simple: 300 warships against a planet that had never faced an alien threat. The humans would see the fleet, understand they had no chance, and surrender. That was how it always happened. That was how it had happened 17 times before. On a Tuesday morning in September, the Velari fleet appeared in the sky above Earth. They did not hide. They wanted to be seen. They wanted the humans to understand the size of the force that had come for them. In New York City, people stopped on the streets and looked up. The ships blocked out the sun. In Tokyo, traffic came to a halt as drivers stepped out of their cars to stare. In London and Paris and Sydney and Cairo, billions of humans watched the sky fill with vessels larger than anything they had ever built. The Velari broadcast their message. They sent it in every language because they had studied and they wanted the humans to understand perfectly. People of Earth, we are the Velari Dominion. We have come to claim your world. You have 1 hour to surrender unconditionally. If you do not, we will begin the destruction of your cities. You cannot win. Resistance will only bring death. Surrender and you will be allowed to live as servants of the Dominion. President Laura Mitchell was in the Oval Office when the message came. She was a small woman with gray hair and tired eyes, but those who knew her understood that her appearance hid something stronger. She had grown up poor in rural Tennessee. She had worked her way through law school. She had served in Congress for 20 years before winning the presidency. She did not panic. She picked up the phone and called the leader she needed to call. In Moscow, President Vyulov answered. In Beijing, Premier Jing answered. In London, Prime Minister Abbott answered. In New Delhi, Prime Minister Sharma answered. Within 20 minutes, Laura Mitchell had spoken to every major leader on Earth. The conversations were short. There was no time for politics. There was no time for old arguments. There was only one question that mattered: would humanity fight or would humanity surrender? The answer was the same from every leader. It was the same answer that had been given throughout human history. Whenever someone had demanded submission, it was the answer that had been given at Thermopylae and Stalingrad and 1,000 other places where humans had faced impossible odds. No, when the hour ended, the Velari waited for the surrender. They had their weapons ready. They had their soldiers prepared. They expected the humans to be reasonable. Instead, every television screen on Earth showed the same image. Leaders from every nation stood together. Americans and Russians, Chinese and Indians, old enemies, standing side by side. Laura Mitchell spoke for all of them to the Velari Dominion. We have received your demand for surrender. We have discussed it among ourselves, and we have reached a unanimous decision. She paused. Her eyes were steady. Her voice did not shake. We decline. High Commander Zethil watched the broadcast with confusion. He turned to his advisors. They decline, do they not understand what we will do to them? Perhaps they are foolish, one advisor suggested. Perhaps they do not believe we will follow through, then we will teach them. Zethal said, begin the bombardment of their military installations, show them the cost of defiance. The first Velari energy beam struck military bases around the world. They destroyed airfields and naval yards and missile silos. They killed thousands of soldiers in seconds. The Velari expected this would break the human spirit. They expected the survivors to beg for mercy. Instead, something strange happened. Across the planet, humans did not flee. They organized. In the United States, veterans who had been retired for decades showed up at recruitment centers. In Russia, old soldiers pulled their uniforms from storage. In China, factories that made cars began making weapons instead. Danny Reeves was 52 years old. He had a farm in Kansas and bad knees from 20 years in the Army. He had not fired a weapon in nearly a decade. When the Velari ships appeared in the sky, he walked to his barn, opened a locked cabinet, and pulled out his old service rifle. His wife stood in the doorway. What are you doing? What I have to do, he said. What we all have to do. He was not alone. Across Kansas, across America, across the world, millions of humans made the same choice. They did not wait for orders. They did not wait for governments to tell them what to do. They simply decided, each one of them, that they would not be conquered. The Velari had studied human history. They had seen the wars and the conflicts and the endless fighting. They had concluded that humans were weak because they could not unite. They had made a terrible mistake. Humans did not need to be united before a threat appeared. They only needed a common enemy, and now they had one. On the first night of the invasion, as Velari soldiers landed in cities around the world, they discovered something that was not in any of their reports. The humans were not surrendering. The humans were not hiding. The humans were fighting back, and they were very, very good at it. The Velari chose Kansas for their first major ground operation. Their scans showed flat land, few people, and simple farming communities. It seemed like an easy place to establish control. They would land, secure the area, and use it as a base to expand across the continent. 3,000 Velari soldiers came down in silver drop ships. They wore armor that could stop human bullets. They carried energy rifles that could cut through steel. They had vehicles that hovered above the ground and drones that could see for miles in every direction. The commander of the landing force was called Kavor. He had conquered 2 planets before Earth. He expected this mission to be simple. The first problem came within an hour of landing. A Velari patrol found a farmhouse and approached it to search for humans. The soldiers kicked down the door and rushed inside with their weapons raised. The house was empty, but on the kitchen table there was a note. Written in English, someone had translated it for the Velari to read. It said, "Welcome to Kansas, you should have stayed home, on 4. Keith Vore did not understand the message. He ordered his troops to continue their sweep. That night the attacks began. Danny Reeves led a group of 40 men through the darkness. Half of them were veterans like himself. The others were farmers and mechanics, and teachers who had never seen combat, but who had grown up with rifles in their hands. Kansas was hunting country. These men had tracked deer through forests since they were children. Tracking aliens was not so different. They found a Velari patrol camped near a river. The aliens had set up lights and sensors, but they had made a mistake. They had positioned themselves in a low area surrounded by hills. To human with military experience, it was an obvious error. They don't know how to fight on the ground, Danny whispered to the man beside him. They've got better technology, but they fight like they've never had to work for a victory. The attack lasted 4 minutes. The humans fired from the hills, using the darkness and the terrain to their advantage. By the time the Velari could organize a response, Danny and his men had disappeared into the night. 8 aliens died. No humans were lost. This scene repeated across the planet. In the mountains of Afghanistan, fighters who had spent decades resisting foreign invaders turned their attention to a new enemy. In the jungles of Vietnam and Colombia and the Congo, humans used the land itself as a weapon. In the cities of Europe and Asia, ordinary people became saboteurs. The Velari had never faced anything like this. The species they had conquered before had organized armies that met them on open battlefields. When those armies lost, the wars ended. There was a clear structure, a clear chain of command, a clear point at which the enemy accepted defeat. Humans did not work that way. Kever sent daily reports to High Commander Zethal. Each report was worse than the last. Soldiers were dying in ambushes. Supply lines were being attacked. Equipment was being sabotaged. Humans seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at the same time. How is this possible? Zil demanded. We have superior technology. We have superior numbers. We have orbital support. How are they hurting us? His intelligence officer tried to explain. Commander, the humans do not have a single military. Every nation has its own forces. Every region has its own fighters, even individual humans with no official training are joining the resistance. We are not fighting one enemy. We are fighting millions of small enemies, each one operating independently. Then we will crush them one by one. That is the problem, Commander. When we crush one group, 2 more appear. They are not defending territory. They are not protecting governments. They are simply refusing to stop fighting. We have never encountered a species with this level of individual resistance. In Seattle, a young woman named Priya Sharma sat in a basement with a laptop and a team of 20 hackers. Before the invasion, she had worked for a technology company writing code for apps that helped people order food. Now she was writing code to break Thari encryption. It took her team 18 hours to crack the aliens' communication system. When they succeeded, they shared the methods with hackers around the world. Within a week, humans were listening to every Velari transmission. In Tel Aviv, engineers took apart a crashed Velari drone and figured out how its power source worked. They shared their findings with engineers in Germany and Japan and South Korea. Within a month, humans were building their own versions of Velari technology in hospitals. Across the world, doctors learned how to treat the wounds caused by Velari weapons. They published their findings openly, sharing knowledge that saved thousands of lives. The aliens had expected to fight a primitive species. They had not understood that humanity's greatest strength was not its weapons or its armies. It was the ability to learn, to adapt, and to share knowledge faster than any species the Velari had ever encountered. Keithfor was killed in the third week of the ground campaign. A human sniper shot him from 800 meters away while he stood outside his command vehicle. The sniper was a 60-year-old grandmother named Elena who had learned to shoot in the Russian army 40 years earlier. She did not celebrate the kill. She simply packed up her rifle and moved to a new position. There was more work to do. High Commander Zethal received the news of Keth's death in silence. He looked at the casualty reports. He had lost 600 soldiers in 21 days. At this rate, his entire ground force would be destroyed within the year. For the first time since the invasion began, he felt something cold in his chest. It took him a moment to recognize the feeling. It was doubt. The humans were not supposed to fight like this. The humans were supposed to surrender, but the humans, it seemed, had not read the Velari reports. 3 months after the invasion began, the Velari controlled the surface of most major cities. They had troops in New York and London and Tokyo and Beijing. They had set up command centers and patrol routes. They had announced that the resistance was finished. They were wrong. Beneath Chicago, in the old subway tunnels that had been abandoned decades ago, Angela Torres stood before a map of the city. She was 38 years old with short black hair and a scar across her left cheek from a piece of shrapnel that had nearly killed her in the first week. She had been a captain in the Marine Corps before the invasion. Now she was something else. She was the leader of the largest resistance network in human history. The tunnels stretched for miles in every direction. They connected to basement and sewers and old maintenance passages that the Velari did not know existed. Thousands of people lived down here now. Fighters and doctors and engineers and families who had nowhere else to go. Angela looked at the faces around the table. There was Victor, a Russian colonel who was 60 years old and had been trained to fight Americans his entire life. There was Juno, a 17-year-old from South Korea, who could break into any computer system the Velari built. There was Adez, a Nigerian woman in her 70s who had survived 3 civil wars and knew more about moving supplies through dangerous territory than anyone Angela had ever met. The aliens are getting smarter, Angela said. They've started using thermal sensors to find our tunnels. They've increased patrols. They know we're down here somewhere. Victor nodded. We need to move the main base. I have found a location beneath the old steel mill. The ground there is thick with metal. It will confuse their sensors. How do we move 2,000 people without being seen? Ada smiled. We do not move them all at once. We move them in small groups at different times, through different routes. I have done this before in Logos during the Troubles, I moved 10,000 people across the city while soldiers searched every street. The trick is patience. The trick is discipline. Junio looked up from his laptop. I have something. The Valeri are planning a major operation tomorrow. They're going to raid the resistance cell in the south side. I intercepted their communications. Can you warn them? Already done, but there is more. The communications show their command structure. The officer in charge of Chicago is called Vithal. He operates from the old Willis Tower. If we could take him out, it would create chaos in their operations for weeks. Angela studied the map. The Willis Tower was one of the tallest buildings in the city. The Valeri had fortified it heavily. Getting inside would be almost impossible. Almost impossible was not the same as impossible. Over the next 2 days, Angela planned the operation. She gathered 20 of her best fighters. She studied the building layouts and the patrol schedules. She coordinated with Juno, who would disable the building security systems at the critical moment. The night of the attack was cold and dark. Angela led her team through the tunnels, emerging in a basement 2 blocks from the tower. They moved through the shadows, avoiding patrols, until they reached a service entrance that Juno had unlocked remotely. Inside, they climbed stairs for what felt like hours. The Valeri had disabled the elevators, which was actually helpful. It meant fewer aliens in the stairwells. They found Vithal on the 95th floor. He was alone in his office, studying reports on a holographic display. He did not hear the door open. He did not see Angela raise her weapon. You should have stayed in space, she said. Vithal turned. For a moment, he simply stared at the human woman who had penetrated his headquarters. Then something strange happened. He laughed. You think killing me will change anything? There are thousands more to take my place. The Dominion has endless resources, endless soldiers. You cannot win. Angela did not argue. She had learned that aliens, like humans, often talk too much when they were afraid. Maybe, she said, but we don't need to win. We just need to make sure you never stop bleeding. The shot echoed through the empty floor. Angela and her team were gone before reinforcements arrived. News of Vithal's death spread across the planet within hours. Resistance Network shared the information through encrypted channels. In occupied cities around the world, humans heard the story and felt something they had not felt in months. Hope. The Valeri could take the cities. They could patrol the streets. They could announce that they had won, but they could not stop the humans beneath their feet. They could not find the tunnels and the basement and the hidden places where the resistance lived. Angela returned to her base as the sun rose. She was exhausted. Her hands were still shaking from the adrenaline, but when she saw the faces of the people waiting for her, she managed to smile. One down, she said. A lot more to go. Victor handed her a cup of coffee. It was cold and bitter, made from supplies that were running low. It was the best coffee she had ever tasted. The aliens do not understand, Victor said quietly. They see our divisions and think we are weak. They do not realize that our divisions mean we have learned to fight in every way possible. We have fought in jungles and deserts and mountains. We have fought in cities and villages and open fields. We have fought each other for thousands of years. He took a sip of his own coffee. Now we fight them, and we are very experienced in the tunnels beneath Chicago, surrounded by the sound of dripping water and distant machinery. Angela Torres allowed herself to believe that humanity might survive this. After all, it would not be easy, it would not be quick, but it was possible, and for now that was enough. 6 months into the occupation, the war changed deep beneath the Rocky Mountains in a facility that had once been built to survive nuclear war. Dr. Carlos Mendes stood before the most important machine ever created by human hands. He was a small man with thick glasses and messy hair that had gone gray from stress. Before the invasion, he had been a professor of physics at MIT. Now he was the leader of a project that would determine the future of humanity. The machine in front of him did not look impressive. It was a mess of cables and metal plates and components taken from crashed Velari ships. It hummed with a strange energy that made the air feel thick. Engineers and scientists surrounded it, checking readings and making adjustments. "Are we ready?" asked General Martinez, who had been assigned to protect the facility. She was a serious woman who had stopped smiling on the day the aliens arrived. Carlos wiped his glasses on his shirt. "I think so. The theory is sound. We've combined their power generation technology with our own engineering. If it works, this engine will be 10 times more efficient than anything the Velari have. And if it doesn't work, then it might explode and kill everyone in this mountain." Carlos shrugged. "But probably it will just fail quietly. I'm an optimist." He pressed a button. The machine roared to life. The lights in the facility flickered. For a moment, everyone held their breath. The machine did not explode. Instead, it settled into a steady hum. The readings on every screen showed exactly what Carlos had predicted. The engine worked. General Martinez allowed herself a small smile. "How soon can we build more?" "Give me a month. I'll give you a fleet." The first human star fighter launched from a hidden base in Nevada 32 days later. It was not beautiful. It looked like someone had welded together pieces from a dozen different machines, which was exactly what had happened. Human steel mixed with Velari alloys, human computers mixed with alien power systems. Whole thing was held together with welds and bolts, and in some places duct tape. But it flew, and more importantly, it fought. Lieutenant Maya Griffin was 26 years old. She had been a test pilot before the invasion, flying experimental aircraft that pushed the limits of human engineering. Now she was flying something that went beyond those limits entirely. Her first mission was simple: attack a Velari patrol ship that had been harassing resistance supply lines in the Pacific. She launched at night, climbing through the atmosphere faster than any human had ever traveled. The stars appeared around her, bright and clear. For a moment she forgot about the war and simply enjoyed the view. Then her sensors detected the enemy, and she remembered why she was there. The Velari ship was larger than hers. It had better weapons and stronger shields, but Maya had something the alien pilot did not have. She had spent her entire career learning to fly machines that were not quite ready, that had flaws and weaknesses, that required creativity and instinct to control. The Velari flew by rules. Maya flew by feel. The battle lasted 4 minutes. Maya dodged energy beams that should have destroyed her. She found angles of attack that the alien pilot did not expect. She pushed her ship harder than it was designed to go, trusting her instincts over her instruments. When it was over, the Velari ship was debris falling toward the ocean. Maya was alive, her heart pounding, her hands shaking on the controls. Command, this is Griffin. Target destroyed. Returning to base. The response came back filled with something she had not heard in months. Joy, copy that, Griffin, well done. The first of many. Word of Maya's victory spread quickly. Within days, factories around the world were building more ships. Pilots were being trained. A human space force was being born. On the ground, the Resistance launched its largest coordinated attack yet. Angela Torres led the assault on Chicago. Victor led a similar attack in Moscow. Fighters in every occupied city struck at the same moment, using timing and communication to create chaos on a global scale. The Velari did not know how to respond. They were used to enemies who fought in one place at a time. They were used to wars that had clear front lines and organized battles. Humans did not fight that way. Humans fought everywhere all at once with a coordination that seemed impossible for a species so divided. High Commander Zethal watched the reports come in and felt his hope dying. He had lost a third of his fleet to accidents, sabotage, and now direct combat. His ground forces were exhausted and demoralized. Every day brought new attacks, new losses, new evidence that this war could not be won. He sent a message to the Dominion home world. Request immediate reinforcement. The humans are more capable than our intelligence suggested. They are adapting to our technology faster than any species we have encountered. They are producing their own spacecraft. If we do not receive support, this campaign will fail. The response took 2 days to arrive. When it came, Zethal read it 3 times to make sure he understood. No reinforcements available. The Dominion is engaged in conflicts on multiple fronts. You must succeed with current resources. Failure is not acceptable. Zil turned off the display. He walked to the window of his flagship and looked down at the blue planet below. Somewhere down there, humans were building weapons that could threaten his fleet. Somewhere down there, resistance fighters were planning their next attack. Somewhere down there, a species that should have surrendered in the first hour was preparing to take the war to space. He had been a commander for 40 years. He had never lost a campaign. He had never felt doubt. Now he felt something worse. He felt certainty. The certainty that the Dominion had made a terrible mistake coming to this world. The humans were not going to stop. Humans were never going to stop. And soon, very soon, they were going to come. For him, 1 year after the invasion began, the sky above Earth was filled with ships, but they were Notari ships. They were human ships, hundreds of them, built in secret factories, crewed by pilots from every nation on the planet. They rose from hidden bases on every continent, climbing through the atmosphere to join the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled. At the center of the fleet flew the flagship, a massive vessel that the builders had simply called Hope. Admiral Danny Reeves stood on the bridge, looking out at the stars. He was 53 now, his hair gone completely gray, his body tired from a year of fighting. He had started this war as a farmer with a rifle. Now he commanded the force that would end it. Beside him stood Angela Torres, promoted to general after the liberation of Chicago. Behind them on screens that covered an entire wall, the faces of Leaders from around the world watched and waited. President Laura Mitchell, Premier Jean, Prime Minister Abbott, dozens of others representing every nation that had survived the invasion. They had fought each other for centuries. They had argued over borders and resources and ideas. Now they stood together, united by something stronger than any of their old conflicts. They had been pushed to the edge of extinction, and they had refused to fall. "All ships report ready," said the communications officer. "The fleet is in position." Danny nodded. He looked at the screen showing the Velari fleet, or what remained of it. Only 47 ships out of the original 300. They hung in orbit around the Eternal Conquest, High Commander Zethal's flagship, forming a defensive formation. That looked almost desperate. "Open a channel," Danny said. "Let's give them one chance." The channel opened. Danny spoke clearly, knowing that his words would be heard not just by the Velari, but by billions of humans watching from below. "High Commander Zethal, this is Admiral Danny Reeves of the United Earth Fleet. 1 year ago you came to our world and demanded our surrender. You threatened to destroy our cities. You killed our people. You tried to make us slaves." He paused. On the screen he could see the bridge of the Eternal Conquest. Zethal sat in his command chair, his alien face unreadable. "We did not surrender. We will never surrender. But we are not monsters. We do not wish to destroy you simply because we can. Stand down your weapons. Order your ships to withdraw. Leave our system and we will let you go in peace." For a long moment there was silence. Then Zethal spoke. His voice was tired, heavy with exhaustion, and something that sounded almost like respect. "Admiral Reeves, I have commanded fleets for 40 years. I have conquered worlds that had technologies far beyond your own. When I came to Earth, I believed this would be my easiest victory. I believed your species was primitive, divided, and weak." He stood from his chair and walked closer to the screen. "I was wrong. You are not weak. Your divisions did not break you. They made you strong. Every nation, every culture, every individual among you has learned to fight in their own way. When we attacked, you did not crumble. You adapted. You learned. You grew." Zil lowered his head. "I accept your terms. The Velari fleet will withdraw, but I must tell you something, Admiral. The Dominion will not forget this defeat. They will send others. Larger fleets, stronger forces. You have won this battle, but the war may never truly end." Danny smiled, though there was no joy in it. "Commander, my people have been fighting wars since before we learned to write. We've faced extinction before, from ice ages and plagues and weapons we built ourselves. Every time we survived, every time we came back stronger." He leaned forward. "Tell the Dominion this. Tell them what happened here. Tell them that Earth is not a prize to be taken. It is a fortress defended by a species that does not know how to give up. If they come for us again, we will be ready, and next time we will not wait for them to come to us." The Velari fleet powered down their weapons. One by one they turned away from Earth and began the long journey back to their home world. Eternal Conquest was the last to leave. As it passed the human fleet, Zethal sent one final message: "You are remarkable species, Admiral. Terrifying, but remarkable. I hope for the sake of the galaxy that we never meet again." Danny watched the alien ship disappear into the darkness between stars. Then he turned to face the screens where the world's leaders waited. It's done, he said. Earth is free. The cheering began. Immediately, in cities around the world, people poured into the streets. They hugged strangers and wept and laughed and celebrated in a way that none of them had ever celebrated before. They had faced the end of everything, and they had won, but Danny did not celebrate. He walked to the window of his bridge and looked down at the blue planet below. His home, the home of 8 billion people who had refused to kneel. Angela joined him. You're not celebrating. No, he was quiet for a moment. We beat them, but Zethal was right. Others will come. The galaxy knows about us now. They know what we are, what we can do. Is that bad thing? Danny considered the question. He thought about the last year, the fighting, the dying, the impossible victories won by ordinary people who simply refused to give up. No, he said. Finally, it's not a bad thing. Let them know. Let them all know. He turned to face her, and for the first time in a year he smiled. We are humanity. We have spent our entire existence learning to survive, learning to fight, learning to win against impossible odds. Galaxy can send whatever it wants. We will be ready. Angela nodded. She looked out at the stars, at the infinite darkness that held countless worlds and countless species and countless threats. They had not yet imagined. What now? She asked. Danny thought about the question. He thought about all the work that lay ahead, rebuilding, healing, preparing for whatever came next. Now we rest, he said. We mourn our dead. We rebuild what was broken. And then he looked up at the stars. They did not seem so distant anymore. Then we go out there, we explore, we learn, we show the galaxy who we really are. Not victims, not conquerors, just humans doing what we have always done. He smiled, surviving and getting stronger. Far below on the surface of Earth, the sun was rising over a world that was free. It was the first sunrise of a new era, the era when humanity looked up at the stars and saw not mystery but possibility. The Velari had come to conquer Earth. Instead they had awakened something old and fierce and unbreakable, something that would never stop fighting, never stop growing, never stop reaching for the stars. They had awakened humanity, and the galaxy would never be the